Hello and welcome along to a special show here on NVTV this evening. We're going to be looking back at the life of the Queen and also looking ahead to the funeral, which of course is taking place this coming Monday. We'll also take a look back at King Charles's visit to Belfast over the past week as well. And to help us do that, we've got many guests joining us in the studio and online as well. But to chat to first, Tina Calder is with us. Tina, how are you? It's been a busy week, and you think what we've all been through in the last week and our thoughts of everything, and all I can describe it as, it's been a surreal week, hasn't it?
It does. It feels like something that shouldn't have happened, that should never have happened, and I think we were all sailing along believing that the Queen would live to 500, you know. Yeah. I don't think that I had ever conceptualised her age, if that makes sense. And although there had been lots of conversation about her being sick and people going, oh, she hasn't got long now, and those types of things were being said, but I don't think my brain really accepted that. Yeah. And then when the news came through that there was medical attention, and we know that that was code for get ready, yes, things are happening. I think we sort of walked around the office going, goodness, we need to now figure out what our news clients need. We need to figure out what to do with the station. We need to figure out what to do with our, our commercial clients, because they won't know what to do. Yeah. And for about 3 or 4 hours, we need a bit of a protocol ourselves. And I think that was where it started to become real. And then just as we were in that prep stage, then the news came through. But it's just been a whirlwind since. And I mean, some great memories looking back at her life on the throne as well, and some really happy memories. And the one of the things stands out for everybody recently is watching that Paddington clip. Oh, isn't it just amazing? It is just so beautiful to see someone of that global stature just releasing a little bit of that personality out. And I loved, I'm not sure, I saw it on TikTok and I never actually saw the whole programme, but I don't know, was she on Gogglebox or something? But there was a clip of her and King Charles watching the news, and they'd said something about Brexit, and she went, oh heavens, or something like that. And I just thought, I love this woman, you know. And I just thought it was those moments in her life where you saw that personality creep out. And especially the horse racing one as well, when you saw that win on the horse and the excitement in her face when that happened as well. Yeah. You're talking there briefly about the media. How do you think the media have kind of reported everything? What's your thoughts on that? I think that we have done exceptionally well here in Northern Ireland. I think it's a really difficult thing to report in Northern Ireland. Obviously, the community here is divided as to how they feel about the royal family, but they're not just divided in green and orange, they're divided in whether or not they are royalists or not, whether they believe the monarchy should even be in existence. So I felt that when I watched some of the coverage and some of the news and some of the commentary, I was really quite proud of how Northern Ireland handled it. And I just think that it showed Northern Ireland in a really different light to me. Yes, there was always going to be people who complained, but if you look all across Scotland and England and Wales, there were people who complained about the monarchy there too. So I kind of felt, we're normal now, this is cool, you know. Yeah. And that was a really nice space to be in, I think, for me. So of course it's been a very busy week for our new king, and of course he was in Belfast the other day as well. We'll talk about that in a second, but what about that speech that he made straight away with those lovely things that he said about his mama and his papa and things like that? I think that was very carefully crafted to make sure that people understood that he was coming to the kingship in a human form, that, you know, he wasn't going to be standoffish. And I think it was a really lovely way to get us sort of into the way of thinking of him as the king. I think what was very strong was his comments about Harry and Meghan. I really loved the fact that he made a point of including them and making sure that people understood that they were included. So I think that so far they've done really well. I think he has a lot of work to do with some members of the community. There are some people who, of course, hark back to the days of Diana and the breakdown of his marriage and things like that. But I do think that he has come a long, long way from that. And I think Camilla as well has come into the hearts of a lot of people. So
Well, King Charles was in Belfast this week. I was at Ryder Square. I've been chatting to some of the organisations who also got a chance to be there. And here's a little clip of some of the people that I spoke to. All right, so it is a pretty historic day here in Belfast. What brings you guys along today then?
We got an invitation from the King to get invited to come and do a speech in St Anne's Cathedral.
And whereabouts are you all from then?
58th Belfast.
Yeah? Okay. So what does it mean to you to be here on such a historic day then?
Well, it is quite an honour because we get to see a king after so long, and after, you know, the way the monarch, the Queen, Her Majesty reigned for a very long time. It'll be a good experience to see what the king has to say today.
Yeah, and what does it mean to be here today on such a historic day?
It's a very special day. I think it wraps up the end of an era. But also the start of a new era. As I said, the Queen was our patron, a lady of faith in the Boys' Brigade, and all that we're attempting to do in advancing Christ's kingdom, and she was vocal about that. So it's important to be a part of that.
So what does it mean to you to be here today then?
Quite a lot. My father and mother, they served with, not with, but at the same time as Her Majesty the Queen when she was serving in the forces. And then I joined the forces, the 1st Battalion Black Watch, Royal Highland Regiment. I'm originally from Montrose, Scotland. I'm now living in Banbridge, and I served 24 years in the 1st Battalion Black Watch.
Wow, and it must be an honour. I see all the medals there that you have as well.
Well, the medals are, the first one, as you can see, is the GSM, which is the General Service Medal Northern Ireland, which you've got to serve 28 days in Northern Ireland. Then the three Jubilee medals, and the last medal is the Accumulated Campaign Service Medal, which you've got to serve more than 3 years in Northern Ireland to receive this medal.
So there we go, just some of the people that I met in Ryder Square earlier this week when King Charles made his visit to Belfast, a historic visit, the first king in Belfast in over 80 years.
Robin, we got locked in the office. We weren't allowed out, honestly. So I stupidly went out for a meeting, and then I had to beg the sergeant to get back in, and there was all chaos going down in the building. Nobody had had any lunch. You weren't allowed to open the front door because we're right facing the cathedral. And of course, no work got done whatsoever in my office. They're all hanging out the window trying to get a glimpse of the king. And I think what I loved about it was there was this lovely air of people from all sides of the community within our office, and we had a couple of girls who are from England, and they were really excited about it as well. And I just thought, this is what we want to see. We want to see the community coming together, and to hear the crowd outside singing, and to see how he greeted people and stuff like that. And then my niece was lucky to get a shake of the hand and a bit of a video and stuff like that with him. So I think it did him a lot of good over here, so yeah. I do.
Good to see him, but I'm standing there on the front line waiting for the arrival. When he does arrive, I get a phone call from you. Right, I'm going to reveal now what she says. In fact, I'm going to bring in broadcaster, journalist, and MBE as well. Anne Hales is with us. And thank you for joining us. But I got to tell you, I receive a call from Tina Calder, who's watching the action going on. She says to me, he's not very kingly, is he? But you think what they've been through in the last week, I mean, right now, they must be absolutely exhausted.
I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
What must they be like?
Yeah.
Doesn't it seem a long time since those two brothers and their wives walked down towards the camera, and I immediately went, oh, terrific. And then I thought, or is it?
Yeah.
I think that was a set piece.
Mm-hmm.
The women didn't talk to each other.
Yeah.
They went, they didn't, you know. William led the conversation, such as it was. I mean, getting into the same car was a giveaway. This is set up.
Yes, yeah. And you're an MBE. Tell us about your day at getting that honour at Buckingham Palace.
Well, my husband, son, daughter arrived the night before. I was freaked out about not getting there in time. So we were there very, very early. Walked out of the hotel, and I held a taxi. I said, I'm going to do this. And I said, taxi, and he came out and said, Buckingham Palace, please. Couldn't believe it. And it was great. We a sort of queue, not very many people. Carl Frampton was there at the same time. And we walked in across that big courtyard, in round where the cars come and people dismount. And what struck me about the day was Buckingham Palace is very cosy. It's very warm, it's very lovely. The people are just so welcoming. You know, Mrs. Hale, may I call you Anne? Thank you very much. Would you like to come this way? All this sort of thing. It was, and they meant it.
Yes.
They were so pleased to see their guests. Now, I suppose the standard was flying, and we thought, oh, the Queen, the Queen, the Queen. She was there, but she didn't do it. It was Prince William.
Right.
And I've got to say, he was charming and wanted to know all about it. I was working, you know, somebody had told him I was working for the World Service at one time, and he wanted to know all about that. Before going in, a woman came up to me in the queue and she said, would you like a chair? And I said, no, thank you. She said, I believe you've had a knee replacement recently.
Wow.
And I said, yeah, that's right. She said, we can get you a chair if you'd like.
What's your memories of the Queen, Anne? Because I know it was your parents got a special card from Her Majesty.
I never met the Queen, unfortunately. But Mummy and Daddy, for their 70th wedding anniversary, suddenly, you know, somebody rushed in, because if you get a card from the Queen, there's a whole protocol about it, and special delivery, all this sort of thing. And somebody came running into the room waving this special delivery. Mrs. Shaw, it's a special delivery for you and John. And Mummy opened it up, and there was this card with the Queen on the front. And she opened it and said, John, look at this. Elizabeth has sent us a card. And Daddy said, that's lovely. She said, how did they know our address? But you see, the Queen was part of everybody's life.
Yeah.
Because of television.
Yes.
She was in the room all the time. And I mean, Mummy just thought, there's Elizabeth.
Yeah.
You know, how did she know our address?
That's how a lot of people have felt. We've actually heard so many people comparing her to somebody who was like their own mother or their own grandmother or something.
Yeah.
There was two women crying their hearts out on TV, and they were like, she was just like my granny. And at first I sort of giggled a bit and thought, oh, bless. And then I started thinking about it, and as I was talking to my own family, I mean, it started to become apparent just how deeply people felt, and that was from all levels of the community. A friend of mine who grew up in West Belfast rang me practically in tears and was like, I can't believe she's gone. She was an amazing woman. She was a great world leader and you know, a great representative for women in positions of power. And
you see, I didn't feel sad at all because the woman had lived her life and worked her fingers to the bone.
2 days before,
the very last minute.
Yeah.
And she was tired.
Yeah.
And she died efficiently.
Yeah.
And as I like to think, reunited with Philip, which is what she wanted. She had it all planned. I mean,
and it's interesting that Philip is waiting in a vault for her at the minute, and they both don't get buried until her funeral happens.
Bodily.
Yeah, exactly.
The spirit's up there somewhere.
Of course, yeah. So how do you think you're going to react when you watch the funeral this coming Monday then?
Oh, I'd be fascinated.
Yeah.
I agree with you, like throughout, the journalistic commentaries have been superb. Chris Shipp, I've been watching for years, coming up, he's now the royal correspondent. He is amazing. And I don't know when he got any rest in the last week, 10 days. And there's not one who has let us down at all. Okay,
just to finish on, your thoughts on King Charles III and the Queen Consort, Camilla, who I know you've had a conversation with.
Yes, I've met quite a lot of the royal family at one time or another, except the Queen or Prince Philip. I've met Charles 2 or 3 times, and he's very witty, and he's actually very handsome. I met Camilla at Hillsborough, and we were just chatting, the usual old chat. And I don't know how the subject came around about grandchildren. And she said, I'm just about to be a grandmother. And I said, well, you're going to enjoy it so much. I've been a grandmother 3 times now. And she said, what ages are they? And she said, do you think it's good? Do you think it's really good? I said, listen, it's great because you can give them back at the end of the day. And she said, oh, I must remember that. But she she looks wrecked at the moment, poor woman. She really does.
Yeah.
And she's probably very heightenedly aware of the attention on her and how every move is being analysed, every look, every, facial expression.
Yeah.
And this emotional stress that must cause must be
because she's not bred into that.
No.
All the others are. She did complain about her feet being sore.
Yeah.
And I'm quite sure they were.
I would imagine so.
all
I would
of
imagine
that.
so. Well, Anne, in the meantime, it's been great seeing you as always. Thank you so much for joining us on this special show. So earlier on today, I caught up with a Marie Curie Bereavement Counsellor, Sharon Jenkins, to talk about the funeral on Monday. Here's what happened. So I'm pleased to say Sharon joins us now on the line. Sharon, how are you today?
I'm okay, thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the show. I'm going to start off by talking about a little quote that caught my eye on social media over the last few days. Obviously, we've been thinking a lot about King Charles and the royal family. And the broadcaster Tony Blackburn, he posted the other night that he was amazed that the new king has had no time to grieve in public at the loss of his mother. And he says when his mum and dad passed away, he needed the time to get over it. And he says, I think this should be looked into, as in my opinion, it isn't quite right. So how do you think at the minute King Charles is coping?
I think as with most grief, when it first happens, it takes time for your brain to process it. So I would imagine he's acting on autopilot. He's got a list of things he has to do. And by going on from one thing to the next thing, it can be very difficult to visualize further than the next couple of hours or the next couple of appointments. He's probably feeling very overwhelmed, I would imagine. And it's that grief catches up on you when you're least expecting it. So it could be a comment from somebody, a visual cue that triggers a memory or something, and the tears can come. You can start to feel very emotional or sad. And there's probably times where he's in public and he just wants to run away from it all, just to take time for himself, to just take a step back and be able to have that moment to grieve the loss of his mother.
And I think we saw a little bit of it when he was at Hillsborough Castle, and the incident with the pen happened the other day and the ink was spilt, and he did show a little bit of emotion and a little bit of frustration at that.
Yes, absolutely, which is perfectly normal behaviour actually. When you're going through grief, the smallest things can trigger the biggest emotions, and people can find themselves getting upset for something that normally wouldn't affect them at all. For example, somebody could call around for a cup of tea and you realise that there's no milk in the fridge, and you can have a torrent of emotion coming from that when actually it's something that you just say, oh, sorry, I just got round the shop, as a normal. But when you've got the midst of that grief, you've got emotions that intensify 10 times over. So it is really, the smallest things can trigger. But then unfortunately, with the world that we live in with social media, the minute something's captured and it gets shared, you get everybody else's comments and responses to that as well.
Looking back at the first speech that he made, I thought there was some lovely moments in that when he did kind of share a bit of emotion when he spoke about his mama and papa and things like that.
Yeah, and that's lovely to see that at the end of the day, he is human, same as all of us. And, being able to share that emotion in that speech, but he's also very aware of what his public persona is and what he's allowed to show in public. So that restraint that he shows, I'm hoping that aside from all this, when he gets his moments to just be himself and sit in a room on his own or with his family, that he does get the chance to then have that time to grieve. It's quite a very busy schedule they've got him on of all the new things he has to do.
Exactly, and I'm thinking as well at the moment about Princes William and Harry as well. Harry arrived too late at Balmoral to see his grandmother, and for both of them, it must be bringing back memories of their own dear mother, of Diana, as well.
Of course, yes. Any death, especially family members, can trigger previous deaths that they've had. And I wonder, obviously we don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but sometimes if we suffer a loss when we're as a child and we don't learn, we don't get the opportunity to process it properly, when another loss comes as an adult, it can trigger those memories and those feelings. And sometimes it can be harder to then process it for a second time around. I know that Harry is talked a lot about mental health and support and counselling, and he's an advocate for a lot of that. So I'm hoping that they've had the chance to process some of the emotions with their mother, and whilst it will trigger it for them, that actually they'll be in I don't want to say a better position, but it's a better position to be able to handle another grief. But saying that, it's only a year, give or take, since they lost their grandfather as well. So it's that two grief within a short amount of time. It does take, statistics say it's an average of 2 years to go through the grieving process of the mix of emotions, and they're just getting through their grandfather and going straight into their grandmother. And of course, not being there as well is another, that can evoke feelings of guilt. I wish I'd been there. What if and people say, did they know how much I loved them? They would have known I wasn't there. And actually, the person does know how much you love them and how much you've been there, but it doesn't stop our brains bringing those feelings to a head when we're thinking about it.
And then, of course, there's us, the general public, who are watching this as well. And we've seen many members of the public breaking down during interviews and stuff, talking about our late Queen. And a lot of people describing her like their own mother, their own grandmother. So especially when we're watching the funeral on Monday, it's going to bring a lot of memories back for a lot of people out there, isn't it?
It is, yes. She's been around for a majority of us, all our lives. She's somebody that we're used to just being there. We just had a jubilee. So that's something else, earlier on in the year, that she's always going to be there. This is how life is. So even though we may not have met her in person, which I haven't met her in person, but I still feel that, she's somebody that I know. I if she was walking down the street, I would recognize her. She's she's part of our lives and has been a large part of our lives for most of our lives or all our lives. So she feels like a familiar family member, even if it's not a close family member. So it does trigger that grief that we've lost something as well. And then, of course, if we've had our own losses, that triggers the feelings that relate to our own personal losses.
And I think the last time I remember something like this was when Diana passed away. I mean, this outpouring of grief from the nation.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And again, Diana was a very much loved member of the royal family, as is the Queen. And it was that. Again, and for both, I think, as well, it was that the shock that came with it. With Diana, it was, there's been an accident, she's died, she's gone. And then with the Queen, there was that announcement on the news that she was unwell and the doctors were concerned and staying with her. The news coverage continued then for a few hours, and everyone's waiting to hear. And I would imagine, like myself, we're hoping, she's going to get through this, she's going to be okay. And then have the news that sadly she's died, and it's that, nobody was expecting it. If she'd been unwell, I think with Prince Philip, because he'd been unwell and we knew he'd been unwell for a while, it was like, how much longer is he going to last? Is he going to be okay? But this, and as with Diana, I think it's come to quite a shock to most people as well.
Looking ahead to Monday, I mean, most of us are going to be taking the day off from work on Monday, taking the day off from our normal schedule. We're going to be glued to our TV screens watching this funeral. There's going to be many emotions flying around. A lot of people are going to have a lot of difficulty on Monday. What kind of advice could you give for getting through Monday?
Yeah, and everyone's going to react differently. We all deal with grief in different ways. I think it can be quite overwhelming. I think there's a feeling of collectiveness this time, as with Diana, that it's this shared grief that everybody's going through together. It's important to look after ourselves if we're feeling upset or emotional, to allow ourselves to grieve, give ourselves space. If you need to just sit and take 5 minutes on your own, have a cup of tea, just be on your own and accept the quiet space. Being kind to ourselves, that it is okay. Being able to talk to somebody. There's probably a lot of people who will be home on their own, who might not have somebody they can talk to, who might find it harder to deal with their emotions. But if they have got somebody they can talk to, or there's a lot of helplines, phone lines. Ourselves, Marie Curie, we've got a telephone helpline as well that people can access. So yeah, pick up the phone and give somebody a ring if you haven't got friends or family and you feel that you need somebody to talk to. There will be somebody there who will listen to you and be there for you, but taking time to look after yourself and reaching out if you need to.
Okay, well, Sharon, if people need to make that call for help, give us that all-important phone number.
It's 0800 090 2309.
Brilliant. We'll put that number up on the screen now as well so people can see that as we conclude this interview. Well, Sharon, it's been great talking to you. You've given us some great advice there, and thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
So tell us what it means to you to be here today on such a historic day.
I think it's a part of history, and obviously to be invited to represent the charity that we're trustees of is a real privilege and an honour, and obviously we want to welcome the new king.
But throughout the world now, we're still seeing many challenges, and I think over the next coming months and years, he will have to face quite a few challenges himself, won't he?
No job's easy. Everything's a challenge. We look at what's happening in Russia and Ukraine at the minute. We've come a long way here in Northern Ireland. We've moved forward. The next step would be to get a government in place, and if we can get Charles to persuade the new Prime Minister to put something in place, it helps funding for all sorts of organisations. As a charity, we rely on funding coming forward. So without a budget in place, it's really difficult for us to be able to plan for our future.
So Lee, such a historic day today. You're one of the lucky people because you got one of the hottest invitations in town, haven't you?
Yeah, well, we were invited as part of our organisation's commitment to community development in Northern Ireland.
So what does it mean to you then to be here today on such a special day?
Well, as part of our organisation, we do represent a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds across Northern Ireland, and it's so impactful for us to be able to come and, observe the occasion, especially of His Majesty coming to the service today.
Exactly, and talking about King Charles III, how do you think he's going to be as a king then?
I think it's really too early to say how he'll be as a king, but I do know just personally watching his first speech, it was really, really impactful and really meaningful.
So thank you for watching our NVTV special. I'm still here. Tina Calder's still with us in the studio, and journalist Paul Martin joins us now as well. Paul, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
So what a week it's been. I mean, what's your take on the events over the past week?
Surreal. I mean, one thing that's really sort of grabbed me is how much we took the Queen for granted, actually, because I grew up in the back garden of Windsor Castle, more or less. I grew up in Windsor, and literally my school had a view of the South Tower where the flag would be flying if she was in, which was a lot because she loved Windsor Castle. And then, of course, moved to Northern Ireland, and you see the Queen all the time on TV. You launch your career. You're running around the world after stars, and I've really realised this week who the biggest star of all was. Yeah, it was her.
Absolutely.
She may not have turned up on red carpets, and she didn't get to lift awards, did she? Or have #1 albums, but she was a bigger star than a lot of them.
She just gave them out instead.
She gave. I mean, she literally gave everything. And of course, unlike normal people like us, if her children misbehaved, it's all over the world's press, So she had to deal with a lot. And I've really, particularly from Jenny, who obviously my other half, who I also do the radio show with on Belfast 24/7, the American coming into my life a couple of years ago, they're obsessed. Yeah, totally. They are obsessed with the royal family. So when Jenny came back into my life, we started taking her over to Windsor. She was making me watch The Crown, albeit with subtitles, which is ridiculous. She has to watch it with subtitles. Hello, America. And that really brought me back to sort of watching a lot of the documentaries and all. And particularly this week, she's been obsessed with it, as has the whole of America and the world. And it's a huge thing. It's a huge thing.
Well, talking about America, how are the Americans taking to Meghan at the moment?
America has a funny relationship with Meghan. I thought they'd all be like huge super fans. A lot of them do not like her, but it's really interesting. I think that she turned up, and I think it was the right thing that she showed face at Windsor last week, and I think that's when the politics of the whole situation had to go out the window. Harry should have been there. She was by his side, rightly so. I think this is an opportunity for them to turn their. Not that it will be in their minds at the minute, PR won't be in their minds, but they'll be in the back of their minds. They're only human. Yeah. They're going to be thinking about how they're perceiving them.
Absolutely.
And it has been left, it's a very volatile situation. And Meghan actually was not liked. What she did in moving away from the royal family, leaving it all behind. That wasn't taken well by the Americans. You know, they weren't thinking this was some kind of empowering move. They thought it was, you know, they're big fans of the royal family. They're very loyal. It didn't go down well, but I do think there's an opportunity when we watch those scenes of them laying the flowers and talking, engaging with the crowds at Windsor, albeit in a very somber way. You know, I did think to myself, look, could this be an opening of a door to some kind of reconciliation?
Let's move on to Charles now, because we've seen the clip, the viral clip this week, when the guy shouts out from the crowd, "Let's go for a pint, Charles." Yeah. So is Charles somebody, as our king, somebody you'd like to have a pint with?
Definitely, I can imagine the headlines. I mean, I'm thinking journalist mode now. Do you know what? I'll tell you something, his favourite pub is actually the Thatch in Brigade. I think he's been there 2 or 3 times. Right. The gorgeous little pub in Brigade, just on the outskirts of Ballymena. Been there many times, and there's pictures of him all over it. He always drops off to the Thatch. So I think I would. I think Charles would be really interesting to have a pint with. I don't know if he'd be much fun. I'd say he's got quite a dry sense of humour as well. Not particularly wouldn't want to go on a bender with him, I have to say. Harry probably has done, though. Yeah. I think Prince Charles has got a bit of work to do.
King Charles.
King
Charles.
I mean, I mean,
it's so hard,
isn't it? There we go. There, you know. Yeah. I mean, that's where your mind goes. Is Prince Charles, and he's not anymore. He's a million times.
You see, he is going through a complete rebrand, and for him and his people, that's a massive thing to do, and to have to do that overnight. Most celebrities in any sort of scope aren't able to do that.
So Charles has had basically a lifetime to get ready for this role as king. He is 74. Should William be getting ready now to prepare his time for being king as well?
I think he has to, doesn't he? He has no choice. Age catches up on us all. Not that we're not thinking in that way about King Charles just yet, but it's he's coming in a completely different level than the Queen. And one thing he cannot complain about is if this had happened 20 years ago, he'd be coming in as a new king at a time when a lot of the public in the United Kingdom and beyond would have been saying, well, do we need a monarchy anyway? There was a real, dismiss. I know that still exists to a degree, but not the way it did. And they've done a great job turning that around, not least because of the Queen. So he's coming in a really, advantaged position, which is that there's a lot of love for the royals. Particularly this week, we saw it from the Jubilee concert. There is a lot of love for them. They've got it back. God knows how, because 20 years ago it was absolutely turgid, right? They've got it back. So he's starting out in the best place where he can really, if he makes the right moves, with the right PR kind of people, as Tina said, with the right strategical advice, he can actually make this work. He's not doomed. He can mess it up himself. I doubt it. I think he has learned a lot. Yeah. We'll see.
So, Paul, you mentioned there the Jubilee concert. You've been catching up with Sam Ryder this week.
We have. I've had a chat with Sam Ryder. He's going to be on the show on PM on Saturday in Belfast 24/7 on Saturday morning. It's been interesting because we were off air last Saturday and I really missed it. And we were trying to set up a great live show which is doing what we do, which is great songs and some fun. But equally, we're in a really kind of difficult and unique position, which we all are in media, of also sort of reflecting the nation's emotions. Mm-hmm. So how do we reconcile that with PM on Saturday, where we have Sam Ryder? He, of course, played the Jubilee concert only 3 months ago. How much has changed since then? It's been unreal. And he was certainly one of the big stars of it, and it was a massive moment for him, a great moment of the entire world coming together and watching a concert at Buckingham Palace. We have him on the show on Saturday, and I've already been speaking to him, and I have to say he was very touched and moved, like everybody else, by the passing of the Queen, and he has some really interesting things to say about playing that concert at Buckingham Palace, how he's feeling about it now, and of course a few surprises as well, talking about his Belfast concert coming up on St Patrick's Day.
Yeah, I might add. Wow, what a gig.
It's his only interview he's doing, I have to say, in Ireland, about in the aftermath of the Queen's passing, about that concert at Buckingham Palace. So Belfast 24/7 Saturday morning 9 a.m.
Okay, Paul, it's been great to see you as always. Thank you so much for coming in. Okay, let's get a little taste of that interview right now. Here's Paul Martin talking to the man himself, Sam Ryder.
He then went and wowed the world. I'm going to say the world. He certainly has in the aftermath. And he also performed at the Jubilee concert at Buckingham Palace, which, in what I have to say, and we said it the following week on the show, was the highlight of the Jubilee concert. And it's not that we're biased or anything. We're not. The main man himself. Good morning, Sam Ryder. Great to have you back on the show.
Good morning, guys. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that superbly. I'm flattered by that introduction. That is just lovely. So thank you.
Sam, rewinding a few months, we were absolutely blown away by your Jubilee performance and your amazing guitar skills. You really threw us for a loop there. It was incredible.
Thank you so much. I mean, you know what? When we had the sort of the invitation to play at the Jubilee, firstly, it was like you're bowled over with the honor, right? And then you're thinking, how can I bring something to this that is worthy almost of that honor? And one of my favorite memories as a music fan and a music lover was Brian May, 20 years previous, like shredding the national anthem on the roof of Buckingham Palace. That was like, I mean, to coin a very tired, buzzy phrase, a core memory, you know? As a musician, I really it inspired a lot of kids back then to I don't know, reach for the stars, as it were, in terms of like that showmanship. And I don't know, I mean, what's cooler than that? Tell me. Because I don't know.
It was unbelievable, and that whole weekend was so special. Even me as an American was just blown away that weekend by just how special everyone, you know, looking at the Queen as not only the Queen, but as a human being filled with love for so many people. It was just such a special weekend, and so glad we had it before she passed away.
Yeah, we are absolutely. You took the words out of my mouth. It's in a world where so often there are things that tear us apart, and division is driven in between, like yourself and not just strangers, but people you love. Sometimes this was a moment that brought us all together, and they can be, unfortunately, few and far between.
And we'll go back to Ryder Square here in Belfast one more time during the visit of King Charles III. Pretty historic day here in Belfast today. What does it mean to you to be here today?
Just absolutely everything. Wouldn't have missed it.
Yeah, and a lot of people are reflecting on years gone by and stuff. What's your memories of the Queen?
I remember seeing her in London outside Buckingham Palace in the car when I was over on holiday.
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. You got any memories to share of the Queen?
Well, just she was a lovely lady and perfect in every way.
Yeah.
And our patron for 70 years. So we're not sure now who our new patron will be. Maybe it's been decided, I don't know. But she's been the patron of Mothers Union for 70 years.
Well, I was fortunate enough to attend the Queen's 90th birthday on the Mall. And in the next year, I was invited to the garden party from Connor Diocese. So it was lovely seeing her. She was a wonderful lady. She's given so much to Mothers Union. And, you know, we are a worldwide organisation. We're in 84 countries with 4.3 million members, 1,000 in Connor, 6,000 in all Ireland. And it just encompasses the world. And she did that. She was a lovely, very gracious lady. She'll be very sadly missed.
Okay, so I'm glad we've got somebody from the Prince's Trust to be here today, because obviously your relationship with Charles goes back a long way.
Absolutely, yeah. He's obviously been our patron for over 40 years, and we've all had the pleasure of welcoming him into the office and attending various events with him, you know, at Buckingham Palace for the anniversary. So yeah, we all do. We're very fond of him, and you know, we enjoy seeing him.
Brilliant. So what does it mean for you to be here today on such a historic day?
It means an awful lot as the Youth Development Lead for the Prince's Trust. You know, and he's going to remain our President and Chief. So really, really happy to be here today to welcome him to a beautiful sunny Belfast.
Oh, brilliant. And what's your thoughts on King Charles III now? How do you think he's going to fare as a king then?
I think, well, if it's anything to go by how he has led the Prince's Trust over 40 years, I think he'd be an excellent king, to be fair. Getting to know different snippets of how he views young people and views the future of this country, and that's going to power him through, I think. So I'm quite excited to see how he gets on.
Earlier this week, Tina Calder caught up with the Lord Lieutenant of Belfast. Here's what happened.
Thank you so much for joining us, Lord Lieutenant. I really appreciate your time. I understand that it has been an incredibly busy week for you. Can you give me a little sense of how you're feeling at the moment?
I think I'm feeling really quite overwhelmed by the reaction that I've received today to the service and to the visit from Northern Ireland, to Northern Ireland yesterday. I have literally had hundreds of messages from all over the world. I think people very touched to see the new King and Queen Consort in Northern Ireland. And I think the service at the cathedral was particularly special because I think it resonated with people. The music sung was by Irish composers, Charles Wood, C.V. Stanford, and of course our final hymn to the tune of the Londonderry Air. I think that was very special and connected with people on so many levels. So I suppose I'm feeling poignant. I'm watching the pictures coming from London. I'm feeling pleased and feeling that we have honoured Her late Majesty in an appropriate way.
And of course, being the representative for Her Majesty here in Belfast, the news, I would say for a lot of people, didn't come as a massive shock, but still it was a surprise to many people. Where were you when the news came through? Do you remember?
I do, very clearly. I was in a meeting and I had an alert on my phone. And I think Her Majesty had had a long life. She clearly was not a well woman, but she hadn't lost her vitality. She hadn't lost that wonderful smile. And I think we saw her at work 2 days before she died, which was incredible, really incredible. And I think that was very much the Queen, her sense of duty, her sense of getting on with things. And yes, I think it came as a great shock, not only to her family, but to us all.
And of course, can you take me back to the time when you were appointed to the role of Lord Lieutenant? What were those moments like? What were those weeks like in the lead up and then obviously the appointment?
It's not a job that you apply for. Let me put it that way. It's a sort of hand on the shoulder moment. I had been a Deputy Lieutenant in Belfast when obviously the great Mary Peters, who was my predecessor, was Lord Lieutenant. But one never expects that it will be you. Mm-hmm. And I was asked to come in and see some people in the Northern Ireland office and then to provide a CV. And perhaps it's my guilty conscience, but my first thought was, oh my goodness, what have I done?
And give me a little sense of some of those interactions you may have had with the Queen along the years.
There was always, she was the most gracious and elegant person, wonderful smile. There was also a little hint of steel. And I think to be the Queen, that probably goes with the territory. She was wise, she was interested, she was always focused, and she always had read her brief. She was enormously well briefed. She remembered people, she remembered places and faces. And she was, I think it was very interesting that on her final trip to Northern Ireland in 2016, she chose to repeat a journey along the North Coast, that beautiful train journey that she had made on her first trip here when after her marriage and her coronation. So I think any interaction with the Queen was always focused, but I will absolutely say you didn't go without having your homework done first.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, we're now celebrating King Charles and the beginnings of his reign. How do you think things have gone for him over the last week? I know that there's been a lot of media spotlight on him and his children and what he's doing with Camilla and how those things are all panning out. I mean, I think he's done a fantastic job so far, as a man who's grieving his mother. What's your take on what's coming next?
I've been privileged to work with the then Prince of Wales for over 25 years, so I know him quite well. I think he served a very long apprenticeship. I think no one has thought more about the role than he has. And of course, he had the finest teacher in his mother. I think he will be a tremendous king. I think he will be a reforming king. I think we will see possibly a slimmer version of monarchy, a more modern version of monarchy. And I think he's also a listening thing. I think we also have a king who is tremendously interested in Ireland, both north and south. And I think we've seen that. He's come to Ireland every year for the last 12 years, which is a pretty phenomenal record. So I think he's going to be really quite something else. I think he's going to be a very special monarch. I have great hopes for him.
Do you think there's a little special place in his heart for Northern Ireland then because of those visits?
I do. I of course would like to say that was Belfast, but I think he does have a very, very special place in his heart for us. I'm thinking of something like the restoration of Hillsborough Castle, which of course is the royal residence in Northern Ireland. And of course, over the last days, we've seen people come to lay flowers there to pay their tribute to Our Late Majesty. But when Hillsborough Castle was being restored, and if you haven't been, it really is quite spectacular. The now king took the most tremendous interest, both in the restoration of the house and the gardens, which brought together two of his passions, historic buildings and gardening. And in fact, many of the trees and plants and shrubs in the garden at Hillsborough have actually come from his home garden at Highgrove.
Wow,
and it's very nice that historic royal palaces have opened the gardens free of charge until after the Queen's funeral on Monday, so that people can come, lay their flowers, or just have a quiet moment of reflection in the garden.
Mm-hmm. And on the show, we're also talking to one of the winners of the Queen's Award for Innovation, the PAC Group, and that's where I met you when you were down presenting them with their award. The Queen seemed to have a real interest in business and economy, and what I've garnered from a lot of the interviews that have happened is that she wasn't just a figurehead, she actually cared, and she took interest and had opinions, and whether we knew them or not was irrelevant, but she did have an input, and I think a lot of people don't realise that.
Oh yes, absolutely. And I mean, you give a very good example of the Queen's Award for Enterprise. The other award that is very special is the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service, which is given to organisations that have volunteers. And it's the organisational equivalent of an MBE, of a national honour. And there are many, many groups across Belfast and in Northern Ireland who have received that award. And Her Majesty took a very particular interest in that award and in voluntary service, but also in business, also in her Queen's Awards to education.
Absolutely. And of course, on a lighter note, she was known as a style icon her entire life. My grandmother, who's in her 80s, talks about how as children they wanted to be this princess, and she remembers obviously her father. And I wonder, was that part of something that she was passionate about? Because it feels to me that there was a lot of personality in her style. It wasn't just what people told her to wear.
Oh, I think that's absolutely right. The famous quote about, "I will never wear beige because they wouldn't know who I was." So she had a very definite view that when she came on an engagement, that she needed to be distinctive and that she needed to be seen. So if you look, you will find her wearing, if you like, bright colours. You'll find her wearing jewel colours, very infrequently pattern, because pattern tends to blend into the background. So yes, I think she understood what it was to appear as a queen. And of course, her great, great friendship with her dresser and her personal assistant, Angela Kelly, who has been such an incredibly loyal support to her. I can just imagine that she will be heartbroken, because she not only supported, she actually designed and styled a lot of the Queen's wardrobe.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we've also had the opportunity to sort of see in a concentrated form a lot of the Queen's personality over the last week or so, with all of the different clips of the Paddington Bear, the James Bond, the I think there was another programme, was it Gogglebox or something, that she was watching about Brexit. And what I loved about these was that wonderful sort of sly wit and that sort of almost a cheeky grin. I don't want to be disrespectful to say so, but you could see that she was really enjoying those moments, and it wasn't a, oh, I have to do this, eye roll moment, you know.
No, I think there was a real wry sense of humour there. She was extremely bright, very intelligent, very well informed, and I think very of the moment. I mean, I think who among us did not think that Paddington Bear for her Jubilee was simply genius?
It was fantastic.
Really, really genius. I understand that there is an appeal for no more marmalade sandwiches. I think the rats were taking a keen interest in marmalade sandwiches.
Oh dear.
So maybe a not so positive output of that, shall we say.
I'm sure she had a good chuckle about that and wherever she is looking down.
I'm sure she did. I'm sure she did.
Thank you so much for your time. I just want to leave people with your final thoughts, and what will you remember Her Majesty for?
I will remember her for her leadership, for her vision, for her grace, and I think most of all for how she probably personified the very best of us, because she did.
So we're going to head back now to the King Charles's visit to Belfast this week, and here's what happens when I caught up with Jane Hardy in Ryder Square. Having you standing beside me, I think is the closest I'm really going to get to royalty today. Tell me your story.
How flattering. Well, it all starts out when I was at prep school in Kent, Ashford School. I was actually at school with the second cousin of the Queen, one of the Mountbattens. And I remember once going to tea with her, Amanda, and no, actually Joanna. Amanda was the other sister. And we went to this stately home, which was fabulous. And I asked her, I said, when the Queen comes to stay in Prince Charles, as he then was, what's it like? Are they, because they were family, obviously. She said, well, we have to curtsy and say mum and sir. And these were young girls. And then to my absolute chagrin, at that stage, we lived in a fairly modest semi. So Lady Brabourne dropped her off to tea with me in a really modest house, Moving on, my mummy, who was kind of pro-royal, told me that she and my father were at the Royal Court Theatre in London when the Queen arrived. This was 60s, 70s, something like that. It was like weeks. She said everybody stood up, the Queen, and she was very beautiful. I have seen the Queen only once. That was when I reported on Prince William's wedding in London. And you get very overexcited, I find. It's as if you think she's going to say, oh, look, there's Jane, It was leaving, actually, the wedding in the carriages going down to Buckingham Palace. And she's very petite, but very remarkable. One did feel very excited. I've seen other royals occasionally, but
what about
that's
Charles?
one.
What about Charles?
Oh, I'm a great fan of, we now say King Charles.
Yes,
it's difficult to get used to it, isn't it? I've seen Charles and Camilla once. Oh, my husband will tell you, he's from here. He says, my goodness, Jane is keen. We were near the Linden Hall Library and they were just about to emerge. And I said, no, we've got to wait. We had to wait 10 minutes. It was worth it. And then I did this ridiculous wave and said, hello, as if they would know. But, I mean, they must get used to that. But I have to say, I have a really good feeling about King Charles. I think it's going to turn the page in a very positive way, minimising or making smaller the royal family, but more effective. And, dare I say it, reintroducing the Britain that is pragmatic, efficient, more caring, the one I recognise rather than the one of the past 3 years. And I like his green credentials, and that's about it, really.
So you think in a way he's going to kind of modernise the monarchy then?
I think he's already begun a little bit. Apparently he's been slimming down the staff a teensy bit. I think that it has to happen. I'm not saying we need to be the full bicycling monarchy, as one calls it, in the Netherlands, because after all, there are other European countries who have royalty, but none of them is as significant as ours, and none of them has the Commonwealth. Now that's going to be the challenge, because again, I was reading a newspaper, I'm afraid it was the Times this morning, and it said that there's going to be a rush to the exit by a lot of countries within the Commonwealth. Maybe and maybe not, but I think to an extent, if the relationships are maintained, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm getting a feeling off you already that you're pretty excited about this today.
Oh, immensely. Yes, I really, really am. And I have to say I'm much more excited at seeing him and the Queen Consort, as we must now say, rather than, I hate to say this because it seems disloyal, than our new PM, who after all is a woman, but I won't get into...
She's here today as well.
I know she is. It must be quite tough for her, because not only has she got to take on a lot of crises in the country and across GB, but she's also got to think of a lot of rather interesting small talk suddenly.
Exactly. Jane, thank you so much.
No
Enjoy
problem.
the rest of your day.
I certainly shall. You
Thank
too.
you.
We're joined now by Darren Leslie from Pack Group, who are one of the winners of the Queen's Award for Enterprise in the Innovation category. Welcome to the studio, Darren.
Thank you, Tina.
So tell me a little bit about how the Innovation Award came around.
Well, we designed and manufactured a machine for the aerospace industry, and it was the largest in the world, the largest known machine in the world of its type. It went into the Spirit Aerosystems Innovation Centre in Prestwick, and because of the technology around it and the advancements that we had done from the normal process of producing the part that machine does, and we have 42 patents on that, and because it was very innovative work and we built that machine and designed it specially, then we seen an opportunity to enter the Queen's Award for Innovation, and lo and behold we managed to be one of 5 companies in Northern Ireland that won that award that year.
And so to take it back to sort of layman's terms, basically what this thing is, am I right, it's a giant oven that you make wings in?
It's a large, without going into the technicalities of it, it is a large machine that can produce parts, carbon fibre airplane parts, ranging from small parts of the plane to a full wing. So that's why it's so large. So this particular machine is 20 metres long by 6 metres wide.
And what that does that help the aircraft industry become,
more sustainable. Lightweight structures. It helps with fuel. It helps with the design of the aircraft, the flight path, and things like that. So.
And all of this was done from here in Northern Ireland.
All of that was done from here in Northern Ireland. Yes.
You must feel really proud to have been a recipient of such a high-profile award.
Yeah, certainly. It's a very prestigious award. That's known industry-wide and UK-wide. So for a small company in Belfast to win such an award and be presented with it, it's fantastic. It'll go down, especially it being signed by the Queen herself. It'll be part of our
history,
go down our history as well as the company's. And
of course we have the lovely Robin modelling.
Look at this. This is amazing.
I remember I was at the PAC, the offices on the day that the Lord Lieutenant presented this, and we were most excited about the signature. I mean, we were all crowded round at one stage going, wow, she actually signed it, she touched it, like groupies.
Her actual signature, yes. And then we also received, you can see Gordon holding the large cup.
Yeah, like a cup,
but it's I wasn't allowed to bring it.
Yeah, there's a lovely piece of glass, and then there's a lovely scroll. Of course, this isn't the original.
No, that's a copy.
It's behind locked doors somewhere.
in the scroll. So again, it was signed by the Queen herself and Boris, who he'll also go down history.
Boris down there, yeah.
And of course, one of the directors went over to the palace.
Unfortunately, we won this in the midst of COVID, and the normal practice would be for all of us to get an invite to Buckingham Palace for a royal reception with all the Queen's Awards winners throughout the UK and get a chance to meet Her Majesty or the King now. But there was a small reception held at Windsor Castle, which we got one invite to go to, so unfortunately I couldn't make that one.
And I suppose winning something like this for a company like yours, it's a globally recognised award,
yes.
And the Queen was known for caring about industry and innovation and economy. How have you found your clients to, what's their response been to something like this?
It's very positive, especially in the certain industries. you know, especially within the aerospace sector. You know, it's a very thriving industry, and especially with the downturn it had during COVID, and that's why going to any events, I would tend to try to wear my Queen's Award badge and things like that, because it's a conversation starter. People look at it, and people that do understand the award and do recognise it, it starts conversations, and it catches people's eye, and that's one thing that I've noticed that catches the eye of people that are in that industry and know about the Queen's Award, and starts the conversation. How did you win the Queen's Award? And then that gets you talking about business. So yes, it's had a very positive outcome for us.
And of course, it brings a real sense of pride to the staff.
It does, definitely,
at
yes.
PAC as well.
Even personal pride, and even family pride as well. You know, I say it's something. It's once in a lifetime opportunity. I say hopefully we can go for it again in the future with something else that we've designed and built that's innovative. But yeah, fantastic.
Robin, that seems to be something that is coming through quite a bit at the moment. There's lots of stories about businesses that have won awards like this, and business leaders who have been awarded different things.
You should tend to forget about the business leaders of businesses, and as I found in Ryder Square during the week as well at King Charles's visit, the amount of organisations who are just supported by the royal family, and I was talking to the Prince's Trust and organisations like that have done so much great work over the years as well.
Scouts, I think, were there.
The Scouts were there, the Boys Brigade was there, I think it was the Women's Institute I was talking to, everything, so many people. And you forget there's actually hundreds of these organisations. So to have something like this, I mean, this is something very, very special, isn't it? It really is.
Well, Darren, thank you so much for coming in to chat to us a little bit about this. I'll be stealing that on the way out. We're going to take a look at a few clips now of King Charles arriving here in Belfast.
So that concludes our Royal Special here on NVTV. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to all our guests, and of course, thank you to you as well, Tina Calder.
Thank you.
It's been a weird show, this, hasn't it?
Do you know, it's really weird because I was a little nervous doing it because I was worried that it was going to be a bit sombre, because obviously the coronation of a new king is a positive thing and the dying of a queen is not. And so I was really worried about how we'd put all of that together, but I'm glad to say we're at the end and those nerves are gone.
We are, but we are going to go out on a nice happy moment. We've shared lots of lovely memories of the Queen, and I was talking to Frank Mitchell, TV legend, weather watching legend, who was in here recently and told me this lovely story of how he met the Queen when she came to UTV, and he got the chance to actually tell her how to present the weather. So we're going to finish off with this fabulous story from Frank Mitchell. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. I want to go back to the Queen now because you've met her. You had her in the UTV studios.
That was one of the main highlights of the career. We came in one day, we were told a special guest would be arriving. I was then taken aside by the boss and I was told that the special guest would be entertained by myself in the studio. And you could tell probably from the presence of the airport type security that the special guest was A-lister. And the Queen arrived along with one of the ladies from Buckingham Palace, who then took me aside and said, Mr. Mitchell, you will be liaising with Her Majesty the Queen. There are two rules. you do not touch Her Majesty and you do not instruct Her Majesty. And I had no intention of either touching or instructing her, but we're in the studio. And William, who was directing, said to me, make sure she looks into the lens of the camera. So I'm standing looking into the lens, but the Queen comes up to me and she's asked me all about the weather maps, but she's standing with her back to the camera. And William says, in as conversational a way as he can, into my ear, because this has been taken by BBC, by Sky, by numerous news outlets around the world, get her to turn round, can you get her to turn? And I was thinking, I'm not allowed to touch her, I'm not allowed to instruct her. So I said, Your Majesty, for me to get my best view, I always look right into that camera. And she turned around and William says, got her! And that was the shot that was used literally all over the world.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, then 2 days later, we were in Hello magazine, and the president of Chile, who'd just been associated with the rescue of the miners at that time that were lost in Chile, and me. Yeah. A 2-page spread in Hello magazine, and it was that day I thought to myself, yeah, that's a breakthrough, and that's a breakthrough in the career. And then sometime later, my phone started to ring and ring. This was a number of weeks later, ring and ring and ring when I was driving. Couldn't answer it, and all these missed calls. And I pulled in to get all these messages to say, "You're on. Have I got news for you?" Where they had shown a shot of the very same spot and used the gag about the Queen is now at weather school and she's auditioning for a new job with ITV. So, I got a good turn out of it.